Hey, Rufus. Hey, buddy. So, before we get going on this episode where we pay our respects to Aerosmith by choosing top five albums and a couple honorable mentions, I'm very excited to show you something that helped me to put this episode together because I had a hard time choosing. But I found the most amazing piece of cutting edge technology to help me select my favorite Aerosmith albums. I'm going to show it to you right now. Check this baby out. Look, this is the Aerosmith album selector. This thing is incredible. I mean, look at this. So, it's like Wheel of Fortune, right? Or Price is Right. It's like, okay, take a spin and see where it lands. Yeah, okay, it doesn't spin all that well, but this is going to come in handy to no end. Can't wait to try it out with the boys here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and a very special episode is happening right now. If this particular configuration lineup of people looks familiar to you, all the four of us have appeared on one other episode that I can think of. Jex, why does this particular TVC mark whatever look familiar?
Because of the trauma. That was the least favorite Kiss songs episode.
Yeah, you really messed that one up, didn't you?
Yeah,
I sure did.
So for those that haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. Basically, Jex, we're listing our least favorite Kiss songs. Jex is listing our favorite Kiss songs, and in full, like, innocently thinking we were going to agree with them. So I don't that this one is going to be quite so intense.
Yeah.
What we're doing on this episode, I'm sure everybody watching this knows by now. Aerosmith has announced their retirement from touring because of Steven Tyler's vocal issues. He just can't seem to, get that wonderful voice back to where it was. And I personally, I don't think they owe anyone anything. I think that their place in rock history is cemented, and so we kind of want to pay a little tribute to the bad boys from Boston. I will say that I think, pretty sure of the four of us, Will is the only one who's actually seen Aerosmith live. There are some clips of that show from an episode I did a couple years back when I talked to Julian Gill about his excellent Aerosmith book, which covers their touring history from 73 to 85. Great book, highly recommended. But from the clips that Will sent me, Tyler sounded great at that show. Not to mention the fact that Extreme was opening up, but that's another story. I missed that one. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to go through something that's really not easy. We're going to talk about our top five Aerosmith albums with a couple of honorable mentions. But before we get into that, there is something I do want to talk about as we're filming this. It's just a few days after learning of the tragic death of great white singer Jack Russell. I know there's been other singers. Jack Russell is the great white singer. Let's just, establish that. And this is one of the many Bob Kulick overseen tribute albums that came out in the mid to late 90s. This one's called Not the Same Old Song and Dance, a tribute to Aerosmith. Came out on Deadline Records, which a lot of them did. But Jack Russell is on here. I mean, it's a really, really good rendition of Same Old Song and Dance, and Jack just sings it really, really well. This is actually a really good tribute CD. Some of those are hit and miss. I recommend looking for this one. I think it's been issued with different covers, but I kind of like this one. It's a nod to Get a Grip, and there's just something about it that looks like, it's worthy of having the Aerosmith name on it. But, I mean, it's got Janie Lane singing No Surprise. It's got Stephen Pearcy singing Toys in the Attic, Ronnie James Dio and Yngwie Malmsteen doing Dream On. If you've ever wondered what Sweet Emotion would sound like if it was a Damn Yankees song, you get Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw doing that song. And their other damn Yankee guy, partner Ted Nugent, does Ragdoll. Mark Slaughter does a great job on Back in the Saddle. Anyway, it's just really, really good. So, yeah. So a salute to Jack Russell before we go to do the regular episode. So, guys, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to go clockwise as I see you. We're going to start with honorable mentions, then we'll get into the top five. So, from what I see, we're going to start with Mike. Mike, give us your honorable mentions for Aerosmith albums.
Sure thing, Tim. I have them right over here. I will be pulling most of my discs out of this right here, the Box of Fire.
Ooh, Box of Fire.
But my first honorable mention is the... Oh, hold on a second. Wait. I have a telegram. A telegram for Jex Russell. Don't screw this up. Signed, Ray Coburn. Honeymoon Suite, Kim Mitchell. Whew, okay. With that out of the way, 1997's Nine Lives, I think, is an underappreciated album, and I would rate this as my number 7, essentially, in this list. I really think that this is an underappreciated album. Very little filler, in my opinion. And yes, Tim has the alternate cover there. I have the original, which was quote unquote.
I got the original on CD. I've got the other cover on vinyl.
This was banned or deleted.
Yeah, I bought it. You had to, if you didn't buy it when it first came out, you didn't get that cover.
Right. My other runner-up, my second runner-up, is actually, I want to go all the way back. Album number 1. I truly love this album. I gave it a spin the night that we heard the news of Aerosmith's, we'll call it retirement, I suppose. Retirement from the road. We know that much. Retirement from the road. 1973? Yes, 1973. And it's a very prototypical Aerosmith compared to what came even on Get Your Wings. Steven Tyler's kind of singing with this affected... It sounds like a Muppet almost. He almost sounds like a Muppet. But,
yeah, a little bit.
You very quickly acquire a taste for it, especially if you're already familiar with Dream On, which is on this album. In my opinion, this is all killer, no filler. Walking the Dog, yes. Yeah, so those are my 2 runners-up.
Cool. Good choices. Jex, your 2 choices for runners-up.
Okay.
Ray is watching.
This was not easy. This could have made my list, but it got bumped out. But I'm going to mention it because I love the album. This is Rockin' a Hard Place, 1982. I refer to this as the Black Sheep Aerosmith album because it's so different, mainly because of who was involved. Joe Perry was no longer in the band, and Jimmy Crespo was taking over for rhythm and lead guitars. Why am I drawing a blank here? Who's the original Aerosmith guitarist?
Bradley Whitford.
Thank you.
I was going to say, don't you love it how we just let Jex flounder there, not help him out.
Anyway, he recorded one song only, which is Lightning Strikes. Crespo took over all guitar duties after, but then you still have Rick Dufay pictured, even though he's not on there. But
that back cover cracks me up.
It's so fun to look at.
No pun intended, crack, but
Yeah, you got Joey with the beard. That trips me out every time.
He looks like Michael Anthony.
Yeah, he totally does. But yeah, anyway, back to the album. I like it for what it is. For as different of an Aerosmith album, I think the songs are really good. Lightning Strikes, I think, is the only one that became somewhat of a hit. What else? Cry Me a River, Prelude to Joni's Butterfly, Rockin' Hard Place, the title track. Great stuff. I know it's not a fan favorite. I think it's great, for as weird as it is. And my second runner-up, it got briefly mentioned by Tim earlier. This is Get a Grip. Again, could have made my list, but it just got bumped out. But I really like this one. I think a lot of sentimental value because I remember it coming out. A lot of the other albums I'm going to talk about were before my time, but this one, 93, I was there. I was young, but I was there. I was about 8 years old. But my older sister, Natasha, who would have been 13, she bought it on cassette and she played it all the time. So I remember the songs. I remember just getting it would kind of freak me out, all the visuals, I would look into like stuff like this. I was like,
the guy, is that got the guy pulling his
oh yes, yeah.
That's on one of the singles anyway. Yeah.
So
weird visuals.
Yeah, and that's
believe it or not, that's a Hugh Syme album cover.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is when J cards, you could just fold them out and they kept folding and folding, and you got all those visuals. I remember it just would freak me out, but I was mesmerized by it. And then you had the music video for Living on the Edge. When it starts out and Tyler's got like half of a face, it's all painted black, and then it zooms out and he's like naked and covering himself. I'm like, this is so weird. I shouldn't be seeing this. And then you got that. I forget if it's a green guy or a yellow guy or it would freak me out, but I couldn't look away, right? So those memories make me have even more of an appreciation for the album, and I really like the songs. Although the singles, I got to skip them. We were talking about that earlier this week in preparation. I'm like, I can't do Crying, Crazy, Amazing. Those are like, I can do without those, but the songs that rock, they rock hard. But this is in the days of, CDs were all the rage. So record companies were like, hey, let's cram as much stuff on there as we can. We could fit 80 minutes.
That's a good point. That was the first Aerosmith album to really come out in the CD age. So yeah, it's a long album, and it's even longer if you get the bonus tracks. Anyone remember the furry version of the CD that was out?
You want to see it?
Oh,
yes, please.
You want to see it? Okay.
There's a furry version of it. It's like literally, a velvet or like where the cowhide would be.
I've heard of it. I don't know if I've ever come across it.
I remember seeing it, but at the time, I already had the regular CD, and it was like twice the price. So, yeah.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
For good measure, I just grabbed all the singles too, but there's a whack of singles from this album. This was like kind of like an EP.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
But here's the furry version that Tim's referring to, which we used to stock at the record store, called it the cowhide cover. Interior is the same. I believe that's the same CD.
No,
it's not.
No, that's a different looking CD.
Okay.
Oh,
yes. I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
I like this one a lot better, but the booklet's identical. I know for a fact the booklet's identical. It's just basically a booklet that's been glued in, and that's all there is to it. There's nothing. There's no identifying marks here, and each one was unique. Each one had a completely different cow pattern.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, no two are identical. Yeah.
I remember that, as you can see above me there. I bought that on vinyl. I sent away for it in '93, which is when there was no domestic vinyl coming out. So I remember thinking it would be so cool to have a current album on vinyl. It's on 2 records, and it also has Can't Stop Messin', which is one of the B-sides on the regular album. I think that's from Germany. So yeah, good choices, Jax. Okay, Will, your honorable mentions.
Okay, as usual, I have nothing with me because someday I will be prepared and have
it's all up here.
Everything will be moved down to St. John, but none of my music stuff is here, so still don't have anything. But my essentially number 7 is Done with Mirrors. I think that album is pretty solid the whole way through. And like Let the Music Do the Talking is a great opener. Pretty solid album. And essentially my number 6, which has been talked about by Mike already, is 9 Lives. Again, solid pretty much the whole way through. I don't think the ballads get overbearing. I do think if the album was about 20 minutes shorter, it would be very, very strong material. But yeah, those are my 2 honorable mentions.
So my 2 honorable mentions, and I'm using a very high-tech system to make these choices because it wasn't easy. Ding. My first choice, this is going to seem low to people. It's going to seem low. These are all our picks. Poison the Attic. 3rd album, 1975. If you look at the career of a lot of different bands and artists, it's the 3rd album that did it. I mean, Bon Jovi, Metallica. Why am I drawing a blank? There are lots of examples I can think of if I wasn't live filming. Anybody can kick in any time now and help me out here, but no one will because you guys are who you are. Can't hear. Yeah, who cares? But yeah, the third album is generally the charm. I mean, they talk about the debut, then the sophomore slump sometimes happens, but then the 3rd album is where it all comes together. Probably the most famous worldwide example is Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. But yeah, this is where, they had their first top 40 singles with Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion. The title song is a classic, darn near an early speed metal song. I mean, it's, one of the heaviest Aerosmith songs, Round and Round, is on it. Like, I still hear that today. I'm like, I can't believe that's Aerosmith. There's not a trace of R&B or funk or blues. It's just a metal song, and it's a good. I love No More, No More. That's a great sort of slice of life on the road. Um, Uncle Salty is fun, and of course, it's got the sort of novelty cover of the old big 10-inch record, which I recently saw on Instagram. Somebody posted the original version of that, so that was kind of fun. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure people will have this rated higher. It's a great album, but like I said, this wasn't easy. More tech. Jax has already mentioned this album, 1982's Rock in a Hard Place. I have always liked this album. I really got into Aerosmith around 1990, and it was just one of the cassettes that I bought that I didn't have. And I knew that this album had a bad reputation because, Joe Perry wasn't on it. Brad Whitford's not really on it. And I listened to it and I thought, why do people not like this album? It's really good. As soon as Jailbait comes on, another speed rocker. I love Joey Kramer's drums. It's a very well recorded album. It's last time in a while they worked with Jack Douglas, but it's 82, so it sounds a little bit better. But Lightning Strikes is an awesome song. I have to say, though, if you haven't seen the video, you've got to see the video. It's really their first actual video. Like there are clips from the Night in the Ruts album that are just like soundstage miming. I think No Surprise in Chiquita, but this is their first concept video, and it sort of goes along with the whole gang violence thing, and it's hilarious. They're like slicked back greasers, and it's always good when there's added sound effects to the video that aren't on the track. And when the lightning strikes,
And when Joey Kramer does that weird kind of like at the beginning of the video.
and Tom Hamilton whips the baseball bat. I mean, he looks mean, man. I wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah, they look really nasty as greasers.
And Steven Tyler's got the weird haircut. You know why his hair looks the way it did? Because he passed out while he was sunbathing. So he was like 8 hours in the hot sun, and like some of his hair came out, and so that's why his hair looks so weird in that video, right? But also a bonus. I remember seeing this. I think you can probably still find it on YouTube, but I think we all know how legendarily messed up those guys were at that time. It's surprising they put out such a strong album. Surprising they were alive. But there is a clip of Aerosmith in Montreal in 1983 doing Lightning Strikes. And Steven Tyler, I think he, wipes his forehead out with a towel, swings it, and he throws it behind him. It hits Joey Kramer, and it makes him miss a beat. And you want to believe, you best believe as Tyler, which there was backstage. So my two runners up, Toys in the Attic, Rock and a Hard Place. So now we're going to get into our number 5. Mike, your number 5.
All right, let's dig into the box of fire here. We'll give people another look at that.
Mike, explain Box of Fire to the folks that might not know, because I don't even have that myself. Matt has it, so I have seen the innards of it, but it's a really cool collection.
I want to say 1993. 94, okay. My covers, I'm a little stuck here. There we go. Okay, so we have 12 albums, which are the original Aerosmith studio albums up to Rock and a Hard Place, plus Gems, plus Greatest Hits, plus Classics Live 1 and 2, and live bootleg as well. And there is a bonus disc here with some rarities on it. This is really hard to get out. I'm going to have to take out the first album and then get the EP out. Box of Fire bonus disc. And this is kind of why I bought it, really. We have the Sweet Emotion remix. We have Rockin' Pneumonia and Boogie Woogie Flu, which was on the Less Than Zero soundtrack. We have some instrumentals, Subway and Circle Jerk. And we have the MTV anniversary version of Dream On, which was only available on a compilation. And those two,
I think that was also ended up on the Last Action Hero soundtrack.
That could be true as well.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yes. And now it also says that these two B-sides, Subway and Circle Jerk, are from the Draw the Line sessions. which is an appropriate segue.
Yeah. And they were also both on I had the cassette single of the Sweet Emotion remix, and those two songs were the B-side.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
I have that single.
Yeah.
But that does nicely lead into my number 5 pick, because I gotta say to you, Tim, checkmate, don't be late, take another pull. That's right.
That's right.
Impossible. Man, that song is infectious. Infectious. The first time I heard it was probably on Aerosmith's Greatest Hits. Is it on that one? Yeah. And I had heard David Lee Roth talking about this song. I heard him say that he used it to drive a herd of yaks up the Himalayas. Swear to God, that was what he did. He used that song to drive a herd of yaks up the Himalaya mountains. And I heard it that first time, and I love slide guitar. This is a recurring theme with any of my picks. I tend to be gravitated towards the slide guitar, and there's some really great slide stuff on that song, which is primarily the reason why I'm picking Draw the Line as my number 5 pick. This is from 1977, and a lot of people kind of consider this the first of the decline, after Rocks. Maybe the first one that didn't meet expectations. I don't know. I can't agree with those people. I love every song. I Want to Know Why, Critical Mass, Get It Up, which is kind of funky. It's kind of neat when Aerosmith go funky. Bright Light Fright, which is your Joe Perry rocker. Kings and Queens, epic. Everybody loves Kings and Queens.
If you've only heard the version on Greatest Hits, you gotta hear the full version.
Yeah. The Hand That Feed, which is kind of like an underappreciated deep cut. Sight for Sore Eyes, another kind of got some funk in there, I think. And Milk Cow Blues. Milk Cow Blues, really good. I don't know. It's got some twang, some chicken picking maybe going on there in Milk Cow Blues.
No blues cover.
It's great.
Yeah.
This is a great album, and I think probably the catchiest tune might just be I Want to Know Why. Yeah. Everybody trying to make a fool out of me. I want to know why. Number 5.
All right. Jax, numero 4.
Numero 5. Number 5,
right? I don't know.
So this one has been mentioned already. It was one of Tim's runners up, and it had to make my list. So it made my number 5, barely snuck in. Toys in the Attic. This, again, Tim took the words right out of my mouth, but this to me is where Aerosmith's sound really they shaped their sound on this one, I find. Album number 3. First 2 albums are really good, but this is where the Aerosmith we would come to know and love really came to be, to me. And you said everything. Like that title track, Toys in the Attic, just so fast and aggressive, like 1975. And back in the day, journalists and such were considering Aerosmith, they were calling them heavy metal. Like when the term heavy metal was just starting to get thrown around, they would pin it to like Ted Nugent and Aerosmith, among others, Kiss. And I'm like, it makes so much sense. If you listen to this now, people are gonna be like, that's not metal. Well, no, it's not, in terms of what's considered metal today, but in 75, this was heavy metal. Like if you listen, like that title track, it's so fast. And then I love it. I think it's a great album. You got the singles that you mentioned, Sweet Emotions, and what's the other one? Walk This Way. And I still love them. Those are the ones that get played to death on the radio. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I never skip them. I think they're great songs. Adam's Apple, the big 10-inch record, which is like you said, Tim, it's tongue in cheek. It's novelty, but it's fun. It's a fun song. Nothing to be taken seriously. And what's the one? Oh, No More, Round and Round. Again, you took the words right out of my mouth. That is an epic song. Like really out of character for Aerosmith, but so good. So good. So yeah, this had to make my list. I think it's a fantastic album and really kind of the beginning to me.
All right, cool. Will, you're number 5.
My number 5, something I'm sure we'll be hearing about again. I have Rocks at number 5. Starts off 3 of probably my favorite Aerosmith songs. Back in the Saddle is a great opening track. They actually opened the show with that in 2022 when I saw them, and Steven Tyler sounded phenomenal on it. This was, I think, the album that Tim got me to listen to as an Aerosmith introduction, because it stays on the heavier side. I only knew at the time, I think, Get a Grip was the only thing I owned, so it's like the ballads that were, maybe this isn't the band for me. So I think Rocks was my first album introduction after Gems, maybe. But yeah, it stays heavier. Sick as a Dog is a great song. I think the album stays pretty consistent. Home Tonight kind of slows it down at the end. I don't love it, but for like heavy consistency, I think this is a great album. And that's my number 5.
All right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll all be hearing from that one again.
Probably.
My number 5. Ding. Is The Comeback. Permanent Vacation, 1987. For my generation of, music listeners, I first heard of Aerosmith around the time of the Back in the Saddle tour, their reunion tour in 1984. I remember just hearing people talk about commercials. I think some early commercials for Much Music before I even had Much Music in my hometown. So I knew there was a band called Aerosmith. That was about it. One of the first videos I remember seeing when I did get Much Music in early 86 was Let the Music Do the Talking. But of course, the big reason that Aerosmith came up on most young people's radar around that time was Run DMC's version of Walk This Way, which they would always credit to Aerosmith. It's really only Steven and Joe that are on it, but it did the trick. It was a huge hit, and it set the stage for Permanent Vacation. So Permanent Vacation is your quintessential example of what Martin Popoff calls Go to Vancouver and Try Harder album. So on the success of Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Aerosmith said, okay, it worked for them. What are we going to do? We go to Vancouver, get Bruce Fairbairn to produce, Bob Rock engineering. We get Desmond Child in on some of the songwriting, bells and whistles. They got whales singing at the beginning of the album. I actually went through a period where I was going to say, so for my generation of people, kids, whatever, this was probably the first Aerosmith album a lot of us heard all the way through in our first purchase. Wasn't mine, but I went through a period where I really liked this album. Then I went through a period where I really didn't like this album. And now I'm kind of back to really liking it again. Hearts Done Time is a great opening rocker. I still love Ragdoll. I never get sick of Ragdoll. I never get sick of Dude Looks Like a Lady. I love Cimaraya. So that's heavy. It's melodic. I love Hangman Jury, which I know in recent years they brought back into their set list, which I think is such a cool song. It's the first time I ever heard the Beatles song "I'm Down." It's just I think it's a really consistent album, and it's a pretty good bridge because, yeah, Angel, was a big power ballad and a big hit, the biggest hit they'd had to that point. And Magic Touch is kind of a surprisingly poppy song for them. Other than that, I just think it's a solid Aerosmith album with really good production. So that's my number 5. Might seem low for people, might seem, why am I mentioning it all? It just depends. Aerosmith is a band that spans so many generations. So flip on over to Mike for his number 4.
I'll start with an anecdote. You guys ever see a limousine driving down the street and kind of wonder, I wonder if anybody famous is in that? Usually it's just a couple of kids going.
I don't see a lot of limousines in Canterbury, but I don't know.
If you did, you'd raise an eyebrow and you'd look, right? But if you were in Vancouver in 1989 and a limousine drove by, there's a good chance there might be a rock star inside. And my sister had a classmate that was in Vancouver in 1989, standing at a street corner waiting to cross when a limousine pulls up to the red light. They're staring at the limo because who could that be? Window goes down. Steven Tyler. Window rolls up. And that's it.
Awesome.
That's it.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And that's where they were when they were recording this album here. And this is another one of those crazy special editions. This is, they call this like the leather wallet edition. And there's a little, look at that embossed. Can you see that embossment?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Isn't that nice? And again, same deal as before, where you've got the CD and the booklet from the exact retail edition. Just
now that CD looks like the regular retail CD.
That sounds right. But otherwise, it's the same booklet. I love Pump. I think this is a superior album to Permanent Vacation. Personally speaking, it's a little bit harder edged, a little bit leaner. There's fewer tracks, no covers that I can think of. Although there were plenty of other tracks.
Co-writes, but no out-note covers.
Yeah. There were some skits in between songs, like such as the one called "Going Down," which was the intro to "Love in an Elevator." There was a great VHS, The Making of Pump. I highly recommend checking out that VHS or DVD if it's out on DVD.
It was reissued on DVD.
Yeah, I have it.
It's really fun to see them goofing off. There's a bit where Steven Tyler like puts his hair up into a weird top knot and starts going like, you know, weird stuff, and they start jamming. They're jamming on acoustic guitars, playing pencils on acoustic guitars, and coming up with a lot of these songs, a lot of these grooves with Bruce Fairbairn. And this is a groovier album. There's some great deep cuts on this that not a lot of people talk about anymore. Strongest being Voodoo Medicine Man, Don't Get Mad, Get Even, and Monkey on My Back, as well as Fine Fine, which is what Tim named our chat group preparing for this show, was Fine, Fine Fine. Any one of those songs, as far as I'm concerned, any one of those songs could be a live staple. But, you know, they tend to stick to the hits. Janie, which I don't... if I was the kind of person that skipped songs when I listened to albums, I would skip Janie, but I don't do that. I would maybe skip Love in an Elevator just because our local radio station killed that song. Jax, I see you shaking your head. Guys, the local radio station killed that song. It's almost like Aerosmith only have one song, and that's the one that they play.
I get it, but not that song. That's a perfect song.
Back when it came out, though, back when Elevator came out, I was like, whoa, like Aerosmith are heavy. Like they got heavy between albums, and you know, it has a really serious heavy groove. There's a lot of great Tom Hamilton bass stuff going on underneath the surface. And the ballad, What It Takes, I gotta say, I like an Aerosmith acoustic ballad better than an Aerosmith piano ballad. There's a few too many of those piano ones. And What It Takes is a really classy acoustic ballad with some nice, I think there's some accordion on there.
Yeah.
There was a cool music video that shows kind of like a behind the scenes with a lot of stuff from that Making of Pump VHS that I mentioned. I'm a big booster for Pump. Spoiler alert, it's the only album of the Geffen Years that's going to be making my top 5, so I consider this the best of the Geffen Years. I like it better than Permanent Vacation by a long margin. I like it better than Get a Grip.
Okay.
There we go. I'm laying my cards on the table. Pump, number 4.
All right. So far, there hasn't really been anything that's been controversial, I don't think.
Not yet.
Having said that, Jax is up next.
I was going to say, give Jax a chance.
Okay, before I go into my number 4, I just want to go back to what Mike said. The Making of Pump, I can't recommend that enough. I got to whip out my DVD again because it's been a while, but I remember it's such a good documentary. And there was tension. There was tension between the band with them and Bruce Fairbairn. Like, it's not like some kind of monster level, but it gets tense.
No, but the difference is that Aerosmith cut tape sooner than Metallica did, because I get pretty brutal.
Yeah, true. But anyway,
I remember one quote that I love and I still use to this day. It's when Steven Tyler says, "I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you're not right."
Yes. But I also like the part, and I think it might be what Mike was talking about, where Steven's at the mic and he just goes, "Hole."
That's a different part, but I remember that too. There's also a really good extended jam on Young Lust.
Yeah.
Yes. Just instrumental. Yes. That is really good. And because of that, I hear the guitar parts that I never noticed before. Yeah. Cool.
Anywho, my number
4. I was going to say, I hope you got a number 4, Jack.
Well, we're just chatting. So this has been mentioned by Mike. Draw the Line. Album number 5. And ironically,
Draw the Band.
Yeah, this was also my number 5 pick when we did, what was it? Top 10 albums of 77 a couple of years back.
Yeah. Yep.
And again, I can't say much that Mike hasn't said already. I think it's a good album. It was kind of the beginning of the end, as Joe Perry described it. You know, this is tension was arising, and that's before the whole, as I mentioned briefly with Rock and Hard Place, that was it was making its way there. But I think the songs are really good. What else? All the same ones that Mike mentioned. Get It Up. I love Bright Light Fright. With Joe Perry on vocals, which apparently he wrote for, I want to say, Sex Pistols. He wrote it for someone else, and you can kind of hear that because it's.
I don't think that's exactly right. I think he was inspired by some of the punk bands, and he wanted to do something fast and quick, and yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think you're right. I think I was messing up my.
It's one of his best vocal songs, I think.
Yeah, it's so good because, and I didn't recognize him. I remember when I first heard it, I'm like, well, who's this? I know it's not Steven Tyler, but can't be Joe Perry. And then I look it up. Oh, it is Joe Perry. But yeah, great song. Sight for Sore Eyes. I love it. Like you could see Tim and I would just start as the title is mentioned. You just think of the groove, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah. I think the
Yeah,
song.
and then like, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, they could have done a disco remix to that in 77.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Like Sight for Sore Eyes 78.
yeah, add a couple of pew pew. Anyway, um,
Put some strings. Yeah.
this just goes to show for me, this is a perfect example as behind the scenes stuff can be hitting the fan, but the album still sounds great on the surface, So that to me, that's the ultimate example of that. So my number 4, Draw the Line.
Okay, well, you're number 4.
So my number 4 is actually Tim's number 5, and similar to Tim, I never used to like it that much. It took a long time to grow on me, but Permanent Vacation. Recently it's been kind of my go-to Aerosmith album for in the car. I'm not exactly sure why, but like Tim said, the hits like Ragdoll, I don't get tired of. Dude Looks Like a Lady, I don't get tired of. Angel, I do get tired of. I get tired of it less than other Aerosmith ballads. It's far from the worst one or the most overplayed or annoying. But some of the other stuff on here, if you dive into this album, Hearts Done Time's a great opener. Magic Touch is a great song. I absolutely love Saint John.
Yeah.
And then going into Hangman Jury, I just love those two songs back to back. Hangman Jury did get snuck into the set list. They did play that a couple years ago. The title track's a great song. Ending on the instrumental. The movie is, I prefer more than ending on a ballad in most cases. But yeah, it's pretty lengthy. It's up in the little over 50 minutes, I believe, but it stays pretty consistent. Samurai, another one. That's a great song. So that's my number 4, Permanent Vacation.
Funny story. Like, so me and my old buddy John, who everybody has met. I mean, of course, John, St. John. I mean, that was one thing. But I remember one time was one day that John and I made one of our many trips down to our local Sam the Record Man, and we didn't buy it that day, but they were playing it in the store, and it just happened to be on Hangman Jury when we left. And I swear it was probably like a 15-minute walk back to my house. And the whole way we're going, hey, boy, don't you lie on track. Like we just couldn't stop, couldn't get that out of our heads. So catchy.
Yeah.
My number 4. 1974, Get Your Wings. I think that this is an incredible leap. Now, I do like the debut. I don't have it on my list. I do like it quite a bit. I mean, some of the classic Aerosmith songs of all time are on there, like Moving Out, and love their version of Walking the Dog, and which is what Rat modeled their version of that after, which is even cooler, I think, because it's heavier. But it's the Aerosmith version is fantastic. But Get Your Wings is an album that you can play for someone who's never heard anything from it. There were no big singles off of this one. There are songs that became staples in concert, like Train Kept Rolling, but it was never a hit. But you can play this for a novice at Aerosmith, and they'll know it's Aerosmith.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you could put the debut on, if you don't play Dream On, they'll be like, who is this? Tyler sounds like himself. The band sounds like themselves. This is the first album that Jack Douglas produced, and that has a big factor in why it sounds so good, because he was their guy. He was their Bob Ezrin. He was their lean-on guy through most of the 70s. It's excellently produced for a 1974 album. I think it's really crystal clear, really good sonics on it. Same Old Song and Dance, probably the best known song for the average person because it is on the greatest hits. Would have been the first thing I think I ever heard. Lord of the Thighs manages to have piano and yet be heavy at the same time, which is odd. I love SOS, Too Bad. That's a good fast one. That's almost a precursor to Bright Light Fright, even though Steven sings it. I think one of the best slow songs ever is Seasons of Wither. I absolutely love that song. And Tesla do a really good cover of that song on their reel to reel, either volume 1 or 2, but they do a really good cover of that song. And they bring up a good point in the liner notes of that when they talk about how you couldn't do that to a loop or a click, because that song rises and falls in tempo several times during the song. And, it's just a good example of a band playing live. And of course, Train Kept It Rolling. I mean, that, it's not even a Yardbirds cover. It was a cover when the Yardbirds did it, but they were kind of best known for it. But now Aerosmith are best known for it. And you talk about a proto metal song. Da, 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 da. Now, if you're like Jax, I know Jax and I were talking about this. I first heard that on Classics Live. It starts right in with the fast part. It doesn't have the opening, but anyway, I like any version of it that I've heard that they've done. There's other deeper tracks in here, like Spaced is kind of a cool departure song for Aerosmith. Lyrically, it's a little bit different. I mean, it's kind of spacey. It could almost be an Ace Frehley song. Woman of the World's a cool, heavy, slow one. It's just a great album, and it just set the pace for what was to come. And I've just always found it very consistent, and I reach for it a lot. It's the first time we get a primitive version of the famous Wings logo.
Yeah, it's like a prototype.
Now, what's odd to me is if you look at the evolution of the logo, it's not at all in the first album. The first album has what I call the Super Mario P-Wing sort of lettering. Second album's got the wings, but it's like it doesn't have the logo. Toys in the Attic and Rocks have the logo written as we know it, but it doesn't come together until Draw the Line. No pun intended, come together. But anyway, number 4. Mike, you're number 3.
What he said.
Ah,
Look at that cover art. That's classic 70s cover art. Black and white photo, the band looking cool. Nice big yellow or gold, maybe, Aerosmith logo. Get your wings. I call that the furry logo. Because if you look, the A is kind of furry with bat wings. For anybody who thinks that this is just the regular retail CD, it is not. On one side, you get the text, but on the other side, you do not. You just get the number. And this is number 2.
I was also going to say that's another thing about Box of Fire.
That's right. And this will all form the Aerosmith logo, as I will show you in a second.
Iron Maiden did that with some of their reissues too.
yeah. And Judas Priest.
Yeah.
Although maybe not as nicely stored. You can't really see it with the glare, but it does form an Aerosmith logo, the complete Aerosmith logo. And I don't really have anything to say about Get Your Wings, because every time Tim brought up a song, I was like, is that what I was going to say? I guess the only thing I would like to say is that I believe Ace Frehley does want to do an Origins Volume 3. He should consider covering Spaced on Origins Volume 3.
Yeah. Or William Shatner. Spaced without a trace.
Without a...
No one even knows I'm alive. Fuck.
And for those who don't know, there's a lot of William Shatner albums where he does metal covers. So
yeah, but he does like Space Truckin'.
With Blackmore. I believe he's got legit. He's got Zakk Wylde on his albums. Check out some William Shatner, folks, if you're in.
I gotta
for
check that out.
Comedy metal, I guess. Yeah. So that's it. That's all I got for number 3.
All right, Jax. Numéro 3.
My number 3. We're halfway there, boys. So I don't think this one's been mentioned yet. I think this is gonna be a first mention. But Tim did say when he brought up Permanent Vacation, he says it was a comeback album. I don't think that's accurate. I think this was the comeback album. And it's done with Mirrors 1985. And I say that because this was a comeback because you have all original members. Not only are they back, but they're clean. So this was a big deal.
They weren't clean yet.
They weren't clean on that album.
Yet. Permanent Vacation's the first clean album.
What?
Pump is technically the first completely clean album.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
because Tom Hamilton was still getting high on Permanent Vacation.
Yeah.
Well, I have it all wrong. Okay, well, anyway, but it is a comeback because you have all the, Jimmy Crespo's out, Joe Perry's back in, Brad Whitford's back in. So, and I love this album. I tried to put it higher, but it just wasn't meant to be. So it's right there in the middle, my number 3. Because what I like about it is that it's just the songs are rocking. It's not overproduced. It's got this raw production quality to it. And this is also before they started bringing in like outside writers as they would with Permanent Vacation and so on and so on. This is all Aerosmith. This is 100% Aerosmith. They wrote the songs, and I think they sound good. Like, let the music do the talking. Wait, Will, you did bring this up.
This is my number 7, technically.
Yes, yeah, I remember now because you mentioned let the music do the talking. Great opener, great rocker. My Fist, Your Face is one of my favorites on there. That main riff is just so good. It's so good. I like Sheila. I've heard people find that song kind of annoying. I think Mike, that might have been you. But I love it. Sheila. The Hop, Darkness, which is I think was only available on CD, maybe cassette.
It wasn't on the vinyl. It's a great song.
Yeah. I'm in love. It's yeah.
Yeah.
I really,
I mean,
really like this album.
Oh.
So I think it's a little overlooked, but and I love like I think I might prefer this. This is gonna be a hot take, maybe. I prefer this to Permanent Vacation and Pump. Love those albums. I think they're great albums. If this was a top 10, they probably would have made my list. But if I had to pick, I think I like this one a little better because of that raw quality.
But you do have to pick. That's the whole point of this video.
What?
You do have to pick.
Yeah, I was just about to say Jax isn't doing too bad.
Like unless your Pump is next, you did pick.
Can I add that I prefer the cover art that's visible behind Tim, the mirrored cover? That's what I prefer.
Yeah, me too. I wish I would have, but this is the one I came across. I wish I had the mirror.
Yeah, the earliest. Yeah, everything except the barcode is backwards.
Yeah.
If that might have been my number 8. I do really like Done with Mirrors. There are no songs that we're sick of. I think that has a lot to do with it. And for some people, it's the last good Aerosmith album. And you're right, it was their comeback album in terms of lineup, but not in terms of sales. It took 8 years to be certified gold, and I think that's as far as it got, which is a shame. I think it's a good album. Very raw, a lot of them are just one take, which is why, and I needed this to be pointed out to me many years later, there aren't a lot of guitar solos because they were just one take. And I don't know why that never occurred to me. The really cool thing is about Let the Music Do the Talking is because I had no idea, pre-internet guys, I had no idea that Joe Perry and Brad Whitford did anything when they weren't in Aerosmith. I had no idea that Joe Perry made not one but 3 Joe Perry project albums until 1990 when John and I were in Bangor, and he found Let the Music Do the Talking and Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. So like, Let the Music Do the Talking. Is that? So we listened to it and it comes up, din, 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 din. I'm like, okay, it's the same song. Versus, not only are the lyrics different, the phrasing in the lyrics are totally different. It's the same basic song. I've always loved how in the Aerosmith version, Joe quotes Draw the Line in the solo. He's like, no.
Yeah.
Just real quick. I love Joey's drums on that song. Ted Templeman produced. The only time they worked with Ted Templeman. I think he did a good job on it. And I really like She's on Fire. I think that's a really good slide guitar song. And Darkness, yeah, that's one of the earliest examples I can think of. That one and Deep Purple, Perfect Strangers, where there was a song that wasn't on the vinyl. I think maybe it might have been a B-side because Deep Purple had Not Responsible and then Son of Alaric that wasn't on the vinyl. But yeah, Darkness is a great, fantastic song. I would have left one of the other songs off. And I would like to add, I'm really surprised that the Aerosmith camp, never sued Joe Satriani for the hop because it sounds an awful lot like Satch Boogie.
True. Good point.
Unless that riff in and of itself ripped off an earlier song. I don't know. So maybe they're like, well, we can't really. Done with Mirrors. Solid album. Didn't make my list. All right, Will.
Number 3. An album I used to despise, couldn't listen to, never liked at all, but I have Toys in the Attic as number 3. Something about that riff of Toys in the Attic just made me not want to listen to it. Like it's kind of not offbeat, but there's something about that riff that I just couldn't get into. But now I love that song. Love this album. Aerosmith's coming into their own. Sweet Emotion is my favorite Aerosmith song, so I never get tired of that. Although I love the video version with kind of the ad-libbing in the background over top of the song. I love that. Big Ten Inch Records they do a good version of that. They did throw it into the set list when I saw them. They added it as the very last song because they said they didn't want to leave. And it was the first show of the tour. They never did it on any other show. So I think it was really a spur of the moment. Like Steven Tyler whispered to Joe Perry and said, we're going to stick around for one more. So now I kind of like that song a little extra.
Nice. That's cool.
But it's just a good album. There's nothing that I can say more about it that hasn't already been said. So Toys in the Attic is my number 3.
The video they did in '91 for Sweet Emotion was quite good. There's a part in that video that I've always laughed at, and there's one scene. The band looks really cool. They're in like a basement just jamming, and it's really cool. Like Joe's got a second guitar strapped on that he brings around for the end solo, which is something that you never really heard on the original version. They really did a good job bringing that out on that remix. But there's one scene real quick, because if you know the plot of the video,
Is that
guy
the-
calling,
Yeah.
but there's one scene where it cuts to the basement and Tyler's like swinging from the ceiling. Always makes me laugh. Good choice. Okay, so my number 3. I'm calling it number 3. Aerosmith Rocks. Was originally going to be called Aerosmith 5, but thankfully cooler heads prevailed, and they said, "Why would you call your 4th album 5?" Anyway, but I love the simplicity of the cover. I really, really like that. It's a heavy album for '76. Back in the Saddle, even though it was a top 40 single, it's a pretty heavy tune. It's got so much going on in it with the whips and the spurs and the sound effects and the galloping. But I love the song. I love the metaphor for being back on the road and the whole Western thing. My wife Sarah mentioned something about Last Child that I never would have thought of. We heard it on, I think, Sirius one day. And she said that riff almost sounded like Rage Against the Machine could do it. Like, da 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 da. I never thought about that before, but yeah. Sick as a Dog, I like. It's got that really clean electric guitar, almost birdsy electric guitar, but it goes into a really cool, not groove really, but I just like the song a lot. And my favorite of Aerosmith's heaviest songs has always been Nobody's Fault. There aren't a lot of Aerosmith songs that a band like Testament could do and not have to do much to the arrangement. This is a heavy metal song for 1976. It just roars. Joey Kramer's on the drums, the hi-hats. Love this song. It's fantastic. I do believe this is also James Hetfield's favorite Aerosmith song, which makes sense. Rats in the Cellar, another fast, heavy one. It's sort of, I guess you could call it a sequel to Toys in the Attic. And I think, a band we all love, Rat, that kind of sums up their, Rat Out of the Cellar, and they loved Aerosmith, and they had the same sort of configuration as Aerosmith. I think that's all here. I like Combination, which is the first track that Joe Perry kind of took a lead on. Steven sings the high harmonies along with him, but that's mostly Joe on there. But that's got a really cool, like, repeating riff. Get the Let Out is a heavy, funky one. And the drums sound amazing. Like this is Jack Douglas's best production, I think, which is why I was always a little disappointed with Draw the Line, because Draw the Line sounds like a demo compared to this album, which was only 1 year earlier. Lickin' a Promise is a cool one. And yeah, I'm not a biggest fan of Home Tonight, but they tended to wind their albums down with ballads. But yeah, this is a great, great album. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said. That's my number 3 is Rocks.
Very nice.
Mr. Lodano, number 2.
There it is. I like the logo on this. The V Aerosmith logo. I like that. I don't really have a lot to add to what Tim said, except I'll just talk about Nobody's Fault a little bit more because it's my favorite song. It's a Whitford song, and it's the only Aerosmith song about nuclear war. I
thought it was about earthquakes.
No, it's about nuclear
Like
holocaust.
Fault Line. I thought that's what that was all about. San Andreas.
I don't know. What I read was okay. So maybe I'm talking out of my ass again.
But I
Who
read
knows?
it on the internet, Mike says.
What I read was that it was about nuclear holocaust, but I may be. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I love Rocks. I think it takes a lot of balls to call your album Rocks after you just did Toys in the Attic, which had the title track Toys in the Attic on it. But I think they kind of topped it by going into the cellar with Rats in the Cellar. I think, you got those two songs are considered a pair. I got to go with Rats in the Cellar as my personal pick. Of course, Back in the Saddle is a genius song. That's just kick-ass. One of the very best Aerosmith tracks, period. And Sick as a Dog. That always gets stuck in my head every time my throat gets sore like Tim's apparently is today. So I always start thinking about Sick as a Dog.
Yeah.
You're all right about Home Tonight being kind of a weird closer, but actually I kind of felt the same way about Get Your Wings, my prior pick. I kind of felt like Pandora's Box was a weird closer after you have that epic pairing of Train Kept a Rollin' going into Seasons of Wither, which sounds so natural, like it should be an ending.
It almost feels like it's a bonus track.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I almost kind of get that feeling with Rocks and the ballad at the end. You mentioned earlier that, an instrumental sometimes works better as a closer than a ballad. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with you on that too. Other than that, though, this album is nearly flawless, like a diamond or a cubic zirconium, whatever it is. Who knows? That's my number 2.
This is why we do what we do, and we don't talk so good.
Well, I was trying to do
Chex.
a Ricky with Ricky on Trailer Park Boys. Like, I'm going to buy a really nice ring, like one of those cubic zirconiums.
Yeah. Worst case, Ontario. Zesty mordant. Anyway, all right, Jax.
All right, so we French folks have this expression that's called déjà vu, or you may have heard it pronounced déjà vu. Well, we're gonna have a little case of that because I'm going with Rocks as my number 2. Well, what can I say? Tim just talked about it. Mike just talked about it. I agree with everything that was said. For me, if you were to ask me what's the perfect Aerosmith album, well, not an easy task. Many would come to mind, but this would definitely come to mind as one of the perfect Aerosmith albums. I think it's all killer, no filler. Even the lesser songs, I wouldn't skip them. You know what I mean? Like Home Tonight, maybe. But everything you guys said, combination. I love Sick as a Dog. Sick as a Dog would fall under probably my top 5 Aerosmith songs. If I had to pick some, Sick as a Dog would be on there. I love that song. Nobody's Fault is great. Even the singles, Back in the Saddle, Last Child, like what a great way to open up an album. So yeah, my number 2. This could have almost been number 1, but we'll get to that a little later.
Awesome. All right, Will, you're number 2.
My number 2, something that's been talked about already again, getting into near perfect, not Aerosmith albums, but near perfect albums. I have Pump as my number 2. Yeah, this just builds on Permanent Vacation with Love in an Elevator, The Other Side of the hits. And like Mike said, Monkey on My Back, Don't Get Mad, Get Even. Those are 2 of my favorite songs on this album that I think get overlooked. Like Steven Tyler's vocals are at his prime, I guess you can call it. Like he's singing all he can on these songs and they sound excellent. Young Lust is a fun opener, but it's not very often that the ballad might be my favorite song on the album, and even ending it on What It Takes, that is my favorite Aerosmith ballad, one of my favorite ballads, my favorite song on this album. I think it's just an excellent song. I really can't get enough of it. Not that I'm skipping other songs to get to it, but I just think that's a great song. Everything else has been said, I believe. I'm sure we'll hear more. But number 2 is Pump for me.
You mentioned Monkey on My Back, and that's one of the times that an F-bomb was dropped on SNL because they performed it on SNL. I think it was 1990. Because Tom Hanks was hosting, and I believe, unless I'm getting my wires crossed.
No, it was Tom Hanks. He played the
because
roadie.
there's a great
Yeah.
Wayne's World skit Where, like,
Exactly.
Sibilance.
where Tom Hanks is the
Sibilance.
roadie.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't remember if it was the same episode, but yeah, Steven Tyler drops an F-bomb. He says the effing monkey on my back. And so there's only a select group of people in SNL history that have dropped F-bombs, and Steven Tyler is one of them.
You guys hear the dog bark? Nope. Good. Good. There's dogs barking outside. One of them's mine, I think. Yeah, there's a really funny skit. If anybody gets like the best of Mike Myers from SNL, it starts out, a Wayne's World skit, and it cuts to like the five guys in Aerosmith, like,
In the kitchen.
they're sitting at his table or whatever, and
Breakfast nook. Aerosmith is in my breakfast nook. Aerosmith is sitting where I eat my nut and honey every day.
yes, but one of the funniest parts is when Tom Hanks is like testing them at the test. What sibilance, sibilance, sibilance. I used to think he was saying syphilis, but he's saying sibilance.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress.
And he also had to make sure all the scarves were tied just so onto the microphone stand.
The writing is perfect on that skit.
Yeah.
And it goes long. It's like a 10-minute skit.
It's a long skit, yeah. And then they actually do the Wayne's World theme, which ended up on the other side, not the cassette
EP.
single, but the EP.
The one that you and I were talking about 2 days ago.
Yeah, because the B side of that's My Girl, but if you get the full EP, you get
The
directly
live
from
version
that
of
skit.
Wayne's World performed by
Which,
Aerosmith.
I'll be honest with you, I had no idea. I didn't stay up late. I had no idea what they meant. What is Wayne's World?
Yeah, I got the single and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but it's Aerosmith. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when the guy at the end's like,
Aerosmith had been on SNL at least 3 times.
Oh.
Okay,
in one of the earliest Simpsons.
that too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, my number 2, pick right up where Will left off, is Pump. Why did this become a CD? Well, this came out, it came out in 1991 is when I first started buying a few CDs here and there. And mainly I was looking for ones that had songs that weren't on the cassette, because I had all cassettes at this point, just a handful of vinyl. Like the first Winger album, I wanted to make sure I got. Oh, You Ain't One Two, like, ones like that. But I wondered if I wasn't going to have to get this, because I thought this had extra songs on it. I mean, Mike alluded to this, but it had like, 3.2 Going Down, Water Song, Dulcimer Stomp, Hoodoo, and all it is all the sound effects that are on the album. They didn't give them extra track numbers, but I didn't know. I didn't know anybody that owned a CD player. I had no way. This is such a great album. It's such a great album. And I think, I don't know where anybody would have a problem with this album, whether they were an old school Aerosmith fan or whether they were just getting on board. To me, this is an even better summation of Aerosmith, 70s and 80s than Permanent Vacation was. One important thing I do want to mention is that by now, Bob Rock was not engineering for Bruce Fairbairn anymore. He'd gone off on his own. He did okay, because right around the time this came out, a little album called Dr. Feelgood came out, which there was some cross-pollination there, the whole Vancouver thing. A guy that Mike knows him personally, Mr. Mike Fraser, took over engineering, and this album is just pristine. This album just sounds so good. And the reason I never get sick of Love in an Elevator, I love the epic midsection. I hate the edit. I can't stand the edit. That midsection has some of Joe and Brad's best guitar playing. It's got some of Tom's best bass playing, Joey's best drumming. I love the little psychedelia, but not too much that's put in there. I love the different groove it goes into, because most of the song is like buns and guns and buns and God. But in the middle, like, I love how it goes into that. The video's hilarious. The video was so much fun. That was a top 5 hit. That's a heavy song. I just love this time period in music, because there were songs that I loved that were also big hits on the radio. What It Takes, I think, is my favorite of all of those Geffen era ballads. It's a little more earthy. Steven's vocals on it are insanely good, especially towards the end. There is an actual video for it where they're playing at a bar and there's a huge brawl that breaks out. But I do like the in-studio video, which I think came out first, because you notice things like Joe Perry's sustain on his guitar after the solo as it goes back into the verse or the final bridge or whatever. This is just a great album. I mean, Young Lust, great opener, double bass from Joey Kramer. It's like a slow double bass, but it's fun. FINE is a great song. The lyrics are hilarious. Monkey on My Back, that was a very, very much a statement song from Steven Tyler. And he was adamant that F-bomb would get in there because it was serious. He was like, if you really want to get kids off drugs, don't tell them to just say no. Show them a video of me throwing up, he's been there and did that. And unfortunately, it's something that plagued these guys for many years. Now, I do want to mention, and Mike's probably got the Japanese version or the bonus version. I'm sure he does. Look at him. Look at him. Me? Whoa. But if you watch the making of Pump, which has been talked about, which is a great documentary, great home video, there's a part where they're jamming, and it's the end of Don't Get Mad, Get Even. And all of a sudden, it goes into this faster part, which you might be like, what's that from? Well, that is the beginning of a song called Ain't Enough, which is on the Japanese version of Pump. It continues. So Don't Get Mad, Get Even fades out, and then it fades back in, and it starts getting fast. I first heard that song on the Young Lost anthology that Universal put out in 2001, which is a pretty good 2-disc anthology. I think that's now just known as the Essential Aerosmith. Maybe that's the Oh Yeah one. I don't know. There's a lot of compilations.
Aerosmith Gold.
But, Gold. That's the one. That's the one. Thank you. Yes.
You have that on cassette, don't you? I could swear I saw you show me a picture of that Young Lust on cassette in your collection.
Yes. I found it on cassette at Spin It in Moncton. It's on two tapes.
I don't have the Japanese to answer your question, but I had that instead to get the track.
Yeah. And I remember when it came on, I'm like, oh, that's where that came from. So it's okay. This is one case where I can really see why I didn't make the album, because it's okay. But Don't Get Mad, Get Even is a cool song. Voodoo Medicine Man's an awesome song. Don't break the flow with a song that's just okay. Pump, my number 2. All right, so here we go. Jex has something to say to the class.
I was just going to say that the booklet unfolds into this cool little poster. That's all I wanted to add for Pump.
Oh, that's true.
Great band shot. Great band shot.
Yeah.
Which I guess means this is different.
These guys were, by this time, these guys worked really hard to get themselves back into fighting shape, So, and actually, when Martin Popoff and I did an episode of The Contrarians where we talked about artwork that's better than the album, I thought this might have made a cool cover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's also upside down. I don't know. Upside down. With Aerosmith covers, you can't always tell what's supposed to be upright, but yeah.
What's down?
Going down. Okay. So yeah, that's so far. We've been we've talked about a lot of the same albums, but we can only have one number 1 album, each of us.
I'm trying to fold this back. While I fold this
back.
Like
Jack's trying to put the records away. And
it's not me. It's not me for once.
You know what one of my favorite things is in that making of Pump VHS is it shows them recording a lot of Love in an Elevator, like the backing chatter.
Yes.
And they're just cutting up pieces of magazines and reading them.
It's Stephen and Joe and Tom Hamilton and Bruce Fairburn. They're each reading just a random section of newspaper, and it creates this ambiance like you're in a busy mall or whatever, like the video is. It's just perfect.
But my favorite thing is alternate takes of Steven's laugh when she says, "Oh, good morning, Mr. Tyler," going down. And on the album, he goes, or something like that, right? Yeah. But then there's this alternate take in the video where he's like, and every time I hear
is there a part on there where Bruce Fairburn says, "Nothing but the laugh was good there," or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. And I do also remember, I think it's Janie's Got a Gun, where it's like the runaway section where it's like doom, 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 like that. And Fairburn goes, that first hit with that first fill with the double hit sounds awkward to me. Like, just little things like that I find really fascinating. Also, when Steven's telling Brad what he wants him to play during Joe's solo to that song is really cool. It's a great home video, guys.
I could swear
it's
somebody yells at some point, "Don't tell me what to play." It might have been Joe Perry at some point on that video, but there's lots of stuff going on in that video.
I am
but
digging that out and watching that soon. It's so good.
To bring the proceedings to a close, it had to come out. It had to come out. I hadn't brought it out yet. Wasn't in my runners up. So here it is. And, this took a lot of, obviously, this took a lot of whittling down to do this list. And it turns out that basically I've got albums 2, 3, 4, and 5 on my list along with Pump. So that tells you something about what I like in Aerosmith. And this one has a little song called You See Me Crying, ending the album on a ballad. But man, is that not one of the most epic ballads that Aerosmith have ever done? I think that and Angel are kind of in the same category. They have a lot of strings happening, a lot of lush sounds.
They could have almost reissued You See Me Crying when Pandora's Box came out as a single and done a video for it and had a hit. I'm really surprised they didn't.
Good point. You wouldn't necessarily think it's an album closer if you heard it isolated, but when you think about it and you do hear it in that context and that ascending piano line, oh, it's so gorgeous. But there's some great stuff on this. We've talked about the hits, Walk This Way, big 10-inch record. Is it a novelty? Maybe, but man, it's got horns. And I love when Aerosmith have horns. They were one of the first rock bands I was ever exposed to that employed horns. And, that was largely resurrected by Bruce Fairbairn, who was a trumpet player.
I think the first song I ever heard, a rock song with horns in it, a hard rock song, was probably Social Disease.
Oh, Bon Jovi. I used to think that was I used to think that was synth, but then I realized Bruce Fairbairn, he was a trumpet player. He had his horn buddies, and anyway. Big 10-inch record, No More, No More. There we go. Round and Round, which I consider sort of a brother song to Nobody's Fault, which was on Rocks. Those songs are very similar in heaviness.
Round and Round could have been a Sabbath song.
Or a Testament cover. Speaking
doomy.
of which, Testament also covered Draw the Line, incidentally, which was really good. There's that Aerosmith kind of V logo that I like. I find, though, if anything about this album can be faulted, I find the cover art is a little washy. Brown is a difficult color to make stand out in a record store shelf. That was one of the complaints that Kiss had when they put out The Elder, is that the album just kind of disappeared in the record store shelf.
This is a better album cover than The Elder.
It's better than The Elder, but
one of those cool ones, the more you look at it, the more you see in it. I do know what you mean.
It would be better to have it on vinyl, which I don't.
Yeah.
But Jex does. Because you can't see the fine details and the sharpness of the lines. It kind of gets washed out on CD. That would be my only complaint. I think you compare this to Rocks, okay? Compare this to Rocks, and one of those albums makes a statement. One of those
Rocks is very stark, and yeah.
And even Draw the Line, and even not Get a Grip, Get Your Wings. Those albums to me had much more striking, memorable artwork. And when I think about Toys in the Attic, and I picture it in my mind, I'm trying to picture the album cover in my mind when I'm not looking at it. It's like, geez, what the heck is on that album cover? A teddy bear, a box,
a frog,
and it's hard for me to picture in my mind. Whereas if I think back and try to remember what Rocks looks like or Draw the Line looks like, it's very crisp and clear in my mind, and I can picture every angle and every line of Steven Tyler's mouth and Brad Whitford's laugh, and look at the long flowing hair on Tom Hamilton.
That's such a great caricature of them.
Yes. Yeah. So there you go. That would have to be my number one Aerosmith album, and I don't think that's a very unconventional pick. I'm sure a lot of viewers would say, oh yeah, Toys in the Attic, that is the best one. And it's just, there's a sort of a lot of bands, they sort of have like a common ranking that you see in a lot of magazines do this, and it's like you'd have Rocks and you'd have Toys in the Attic and those kind of albums at the top when you see a lot of those conventional lists. We're a little bit unconventional, us four, but I went very conventional, and that's my list.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a reason these albums are generally, like my favorite Rush album is Moving Pictures.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Oh, wait, a telegram just came in. Hang on.
Oh, here we go.
Jax. So far, so good. Don't screw this up at the finish line. Signed, Ray Coburn.
Who, by the way, um, not only do they have Bruce Fairburn in common, but Honeymoon Suite opened some Canadian dates for Aerosmith on their back in the Saddle Tour in '84.
Interesting. Good trivia. All right. So before I potentially screw this up, I wanted to add, because Mike, when you were talking about Toys in the Attic, you reminded me of something I forgot to mention when I addressed it. The big 10-inch record. I always would have liked to hear David Lee Roth do a version of that song. I feel like
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because Martin Popoff has said he thinks that's where Van Halen / David Lee Roth said it's okay to do Ice Cream Man, Big Bad Bill, Just a Gigolo.
yeah,
So yeah, good observation.
yeah. I just wanted to mention it. I feel like it could work. It could work.
Bonus points for Jax.
Yeah, I'm trying. Because I think I've been on good behavior so far, right? I haven't ruffled any feathers like I did in the Kiss video.
All right, kid, don't get cocky.
This might be that moment. I don't know. Are you speaking of conventional, Mike? I think this is unconventional, but what can I say? I love this album. It's one of my it's my favorite Aerosmith album. And it's Night in the Ruts, 1979. Again, this is the beginning of the end. Oh, there goes Tim. Tim, I thought you liked this album.
Carry on.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I think this is a great album. Again, we're talking about the beginning, the end. We're talking about the rough patch, the dark years. We have entered the dark years. Until Perry's not on it completely. He's on most songs, but not all songs. And they brought on Brad Whitford covered some of the guitar parts, Richie Supa, Neil Thompson, and finally Jimmy Crespo entered and covered some of the guitar parts, and he would, of course, be on the follow-up, Rockin' a Hard Place. But yeah, this is, there's so many pieces of the puzzle here, but I think the songs are great. I love the opener here, No Surprise, great Aerosmith song. Chiquita, 3 Mile Smile. I love Reefer Head Woman. Bone to Bone, which is kind of again a tongue-in-cheek. What's Tim doing? You're making me lose my train of thought. And it kept rolling all night long. Anyway, so yeah, with everything happened behind the scenes, like I said before, for Draw the Line, they cranked out a good album. I love the songs on this album. And again, not a conventional pick, not a fan favorite, but when I first heard it, like No Surprise. Even Remember Walking in the Sand, that cover from the Shangri-Las, I think it was. That's a good cover. And if you got to listen to that song with headphones on, because those backup vocals, when Steven Tyler says, "Remember walking in the sand," you got the backup vocals that go, "Remember," and it's so
Get the finger
haunting.
snaps.
Yeah, it gives you chills. Yeah, you got to listen to that on headphones. Everything going on in the background of that song, it's amazing. It's beautiful. Yeah, Night in the Ruts. I can go on about that album. It's my favorite Aerosmith album. My number one.
Good pick, Jax.
Thank you.
I think in the Pandora's Box liner notes, I think Steven Tyler was pointing out songs like Cheesecake as evidence that Aerosmith, even though they were completely dysfunctional and falling apart at the seams and, health-wise also, that proved they still had their chops in the studio.
Oh, yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Number one, Will.
My number one is something that's been talked about, of course, but it's Get Your Wings. This has been my favorite Aerosmith album ever since I listened through them the first time around 10 years ago, 11 years ago, just getting through them. Some of the earliest memories I have of some of these classic songs is, of course, Guitar Hero 3. Same Old Song and Dance was on that,
Oh, cool.
which I absolutely loved then. This was, of course, before I went through and actually bought the Aerosmith Guitar Hero, which I own now. The only one I'm missing is the Metallica one. But that obviously has a lot more of the Aerosmith stuff on it. But Same Old Song and Dance was on Guitar Hero 3. Love that song. I think it's a great opening song. I think, well, Train Kept a Rolling we talked about, that's probably my second favorite Aerosmith song. I love their version of that. They didn't play it when I saw them, but lucky enough, I got to see Joe Perry play it last year because the Hollywood Vampires put it in their set list. So that was a lot of fun. So I kind of saw it, but the jam and the speed up and the heavy, like that song's so good, and I never get tired of that. Seasons of Wither, obviously, the carryover into that should have ended the album, maybe, but I do love Pandora's Box. Maybe shouldn't have ended the album, but I think it's still a good closer if it was on a different album. SOS, Too Bad. That's a great song, like Tim mentioned. I think Lord of the Thighs was reworked partially to Walk This Way. The intros of those sound very similar. Yeah, they sound very similar. So I don't know if that was can we miss the mark on this? We can improve at least the drums, or like something was reworked possibly. But yeah, that's by far my favorite Aerosmith album. I like it. There's a good margin where I like it enough more than Pump that it's not very questionable, but that is my number one.
Very nice.
I got to say, I really like everybody's picks. I've got no problems. You done good,
No.
Jax. You done good. And now, my number one.
Just push play.
That's what I'm talking about.
We're all somebody from somewhere. My number one. Right in the nuts.
Yeah.
Oh,
Jax, I'm so glad
a
that you
deuce.
mentioned that. I went on the Contrarians calling this my favorite Aerosmith album. I know people think I am crazy for this, but I'm like, have you listened to the album, Lee?
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yes.
This band was falling apart, and yet they didn't phone in an album. No Surprise is one of my favorite Aerosmith songs ever. It's got so much attitude. It's Steven recounting the story of how they got signed and mentions Clive Davis and Max's Kansas City, which is a club. The riff, Tom Kiefer liked it enough that he wrote another song called Gypsy Road with it. A little bit down. Like, I think that little turnaround part. I think that the production on this album by Gary Lyons is the best Aerosmith production of the 70s. The drums are crisp and clear. I think Chiquita's fantastic. Really good use of horns. And it's got some tricky drum parts in it too. How it starts. Dun, 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 dun. Walking in the Sand, I think for a lot of people, the first thing we ever heard from that album, because it's on the greatest hits. That song has taken on a new life in TikTok territory. I think it's the original version sped up, but it's always used in these disaster videos or in people fall or whatever. Oh no, you know that part. Cheesecake, yeah. To add what Mike said, Joe goes from like lap steel guitar to his regular guitar and back in the studio during while the tapes were running. When that red light came on, they were serious about making an album. 3 Mile Smile, another one of my favorite Aerosmith songs. It's so strange, but I love the guitar in it. I love the drums in it. That's one of the songs that Jimmy Crespo plays the solo on. Brad Whitford was quoted as saying that he played a solo, Jimmy played a solo, Steven liked Jimmy's solo better. Reeferhead Woman is an old blues, but I really like the way that they do it. I like their version of the Another Yardbird song, Think About It. That's a really good one. Bone to Bone, Coney Island Whitefish Boy. That's got a cool riff to it. And I really like the closer Maya, which Steven wrote for his daughter. I think that's a gorgeous song. That song, that it almost has like a Queen feel to it, like an epic ballad feel to it. But yeah, a lot of people have said the closing like chimes or bells at the end of that are like the death knell for Aerosmith. And yeah, this album, sadly, I think it only certified platinum in like 94. It didn't go platinum in its initial life, but I think it's an album that's worth rediscovering. The band was not prepared. They were going into back and forth between the studio as they were already on tour. This is the famous spilled milk incident where they literally broke up over spilled milk. And a couple of the wives, I think Steven's wife and Joe's wife were fighting, and then Joe took off and left. But yeah, So much so that this cover image originally appeared the year before. It was the single cover to Chip Away the Stone, one of my favorite Aerosmith songs that doesn't actually belong to an album. So they just reused it for this. It's, it doesn't have the logo on it, but I love this album. I remember finding this album and Greatest Hits on vinyl at a cousin's house, and they let me have that along with a few others. So this was the first 70s Aerosmith album that I heard all the way through. That might have something to do with why I have such an attachment for it, but I just think it's a great album start to finish. There's no filler on here, and it has a bad reputation. And I would love for people to revisit this album. There's a few of us out there that get it, how good this is, but overall, I think that all of our choices were very level-headed and very on the mark. And there's a good variety. I mean, Nine Lives made an appearance, nothing newer than that, and I think that's a good reason. But anyway. So yeah, Aerosmith, that's our favorite albums. Feel free to disagree with us, but tell us why, in the comments. And want to thank Mike, Jax, and Will for following along. Be sure and subscribe to Grab a Stack of Rock. For Mike, you can find Jax anywhere. Your WordPress is eluding me.
Jexcalibur.wordpress.com.
Excalibur, thank you. I'll post a link to that. And Will just shows up here now and again. It's great to have you guys all together. And thanks everybody for watching this episode. Go listen to some Aerosmith, and we'll see you next time on Tim's Vinyl Confession.